This is the heartless one, the evil monster. Who dare you take the lives of my daughters Shan'ann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico? I trusted you to take care of them, not kill them. And they also trusted you.
We loved you like a son. We trusted you. Your faithful wife trusted you. Your children adored you. I have no idea who gave you the right to take their lives.
With regard to
In the quiet streets of Frederick, Colorado, stood a house that seemed to embody the dream of suburban America. Its walls sheltered a young family, Shan'ann Watts, vibrant and hopeful, her husband Chris, reserved but steady, their two daughters Bella and Celeste, and a child soon to be born. On social media, Shan'ann painted their lives in bright colors, videos of giggling children, photographs of family vacations, captions soaked in gratitude and love. To anyone looking in, it was perfection. But beneath the filters and cheerful updates, the foundation was already beginning to crack. Friends of Shan'ann would later describe her as anxious, troubled, and sensing something was terribly wrong. Her husband's distance, his silences, his lack of warmth, all of it seeping into her heart like water through fractured stone. She knew. Somehow, she knew. The story of the Watts family murders has been told countless times. The headlines, the documentaries, the courtroom footage, all circling around the moment of August 13, 2018, when Shan'ann and her daughters disappeared, never to return. But what lies in the shadows of that story are the days and hours that led to it, the final weekend, when the truth began to surface, when Shan'ann caught the flickers of betrayal, and when Chris's double life collapsed under its own weight. This was not the sudden eruption of madness. It was a slow erosion of loyalty, hidden beneath smiles and text messages, festering behind the glow of a phone screen. It was a marriage disintegrating in silence, a man intoxicated by the fantasy of freedom, and a woman clinging desperately to the hope that her family could still be saved. To understand this case is not simply to recount the crime. It is to examine the contradictions, the husband who pledged forever while planning escape, the father who tucked his children into bed while dreaming of another life, the lover who erased his family for a future that never came to pass. This is the story of that final weekend. Not the act itself, but the prelude, the overlooked details, the haunting messages, and the desperate struggle of a woman who saw the truth too late. Every betrayal begins quietly. For Chris Watts, it began with stolen glances at work, fleeting conversations that grew into something more. By the summer of 2018, that something more had a name, Nichol Kessinger. She was a co-worker, intelligent, independent, and soon to become the figure around which Chris built a fantasy life. At first, it was ordinary, lunch breaks, light banter, harmless texting. But ordinary soon shifted into intimacy. By June, Shan'ann was posting cheerful photos from family vacations, while Chris was secretly searching Google for ways to start over, ways to be free. On the outside, he remained the dependable husband. On the inside, he was splitting in two. Nichol became his obsession. Phone records would later reveal hours-long conversations late into the night. She filled his silence with affirmation, with excitement, with the promise of a new life that felt electrifying compared to the quiet responsibility of suburban fatherhood. For her, he was not just Chris Watts, the oil worker with a wife and two kids. He was Chris, the man who could start fresh. And for him, she was not just a lover, she was an escape hatch. Investigators later uncovered her digital footprint, and it told its own story. On her phone, search terms like wedding dresses appeared. She looked up Amber Fry, the mistress of Scott Peterson, who had also murdered his pregnant wife. She Googled whether men leave their wives. Was she merely curious, or was she anticipating the possibility of a future that required erasing the past? To this day, those searches fuel speculation. Did she know more than she admitted? Was she complicit in his planning, or was she another victim of his deceit? What we do know is this: Nichol insisted Chris told her his marriage was over, that divorce papers were coming, that he was already separated. In her testimony, she described herself as misled, horrified once the truth emerged. But here lies the contradiction. If Chris was truly just beginning an affair, why did his mind spiral so quickly toward annihilation? If it was only passion, why did he begin drafting text messages about selling the house, dreaming of a life stripped of obligations, even while Shan'ann's pregnancy progressed? This was no passing fling. This was an alternate identity, a double life meticulously cultivated. He was husband and father in one world, bachelor and lover in another. The tragedy is not only in the lies he told but in how fully he inhabited them. For Shan'ann, the signs were already surfacing. He grew colder. His messages became short, clipped. His eyes no longer lingered with warmth. She knew something was wrong, but what she didn't know was how deep his fantasy had taken root, and how soon it would demand a price. Beneath the polished surface of Shan'ann's social media posts lay another, more fragile record of her marriage, the text messages she sent to her closest friends. These were not meant for public eyes. They were raw, unfiltered, and filled with a wife's intuition that the man she loved was slipping away. In July and early August, those messages painted a portrait of desperation. Shan'ann wrote about Chris's distance, his rejection of intimacy, his sudden obsession with fitness and appearance. She told a friend she felt unwanted, that he wouldn't touch her, that he seemed cold and different. Each message was a cry for clarity, a plea to understand why her husband's eyes no longer looked at her with the same softness. The devastating part is how accurate her instincts were. She may not have known about Nichol Kessinger by name, but she knew something was deeply wrong. Her words carried the weight of a woman fighting for her marriage, trying to piece together a puzzle where the center was missing. She confronted him with questions. Why are you so distant? Why don't you want me anymore? And Chris, master of silence, gave her nothing in return but half-truths and denials. Friends later said Shan'ann was strong-willed, determined to keep her family together. She believed in effort, in communication, in fixing what was broken. But the cruel reality was that Chris had already abandoned the marriage in his heart. She was holding on to a man who was already gone. And yet, even in her vulnerability, Shan'ann's instincts were sharp. She told friends she feared he no longer loved her. She worried he wanted out. She feared he might be hiding something. Her confrontation, when it finally came, was not born from paranoia. It was born from truth. She had caught the scent of betrayal long before anyone else. The tragedy is that knowing is not the same as being able to stop it. Shan'ann sensed the walls closing in, but she had no way to see the full scale of Chris's double life. No way to know the depth of his obsession, the speed at which he was erasing the life they had built. Her private words now exist as evidence, a haunting echo of foresight. They show us not just a victim of murder, but a woman who fought for love until the very end, who saw the storm coming but could not escape its path. The final weekend before August 13, 2018, was not filled with family time, affection, or preparation for a new baby. Instead, it was marked by Chris Watts living two parallel realities, one as the dutiful father left behind in Colorado, the other as a man indulging in fantasies with his mistress. On paper, Chris's weekend looked ordinary. He texted Shan'ann sparingly while she was away on a business trip in Arizona, caring for the girls back at home. But phone records and bank statements later revealed the truth. He was wining and dining Nichol Kessinger. One receipt became a piece of damning evidence. At a restaurant, he spent far more than a man eating alone would have, the bill betraying the presence of two. Shan'ann noticed. When she checked the charges, she saw the discrepancy and immediately suspected deception. Her instincts had been sharp for weeks, and now she had proof. She caught him out, not with confrontation in person, but with a line item on a bank statement, a small number that exposed a colossal betrayal. While Shan'ann worried about her crumbling marriage, Chris was Googling vacation getaways and searching the internet for lyrics about freedom and new beginnings. Nichol, too, was mapping out the future, browsing wedding dresses, even researching Amber Fry, the woman who became infamous for exposing Scott Peterson's lies. It was as though both of them were choreographing a secret life just beyond the reach of Shan'ann's grasp. And yet, even in this weekend of betrayal, the contradictions were startling. Chris still played the role of father, caring for his daughters, taking them to a birthday party, smiling in public. Neighbors would later say nothing seemed out of place. He moved through those hours like an actor rehearsing two different scripts, adjusting his lines depending on the audience. For Shan'ann, miles away, the truth was closing in. She texted friends about his coldness, his refusal to answer her questions directly. She wrote about his lack of affection and confessed that she felt unwanted, invisible in her own marriage. The picture she posted online, a glowing mother with her two daughters, masked a private storm she couldn't contain. That final weekend was not just about betrayal. It was about exposure. Chris's lies were beginning to fray. Shan'ann had the evidence in her hand, her suspicions validated. And Chris, knowing the walls were closing in, faced the terrifying reality that his double life was unsustainable. It was the last weekend he could maintain the illusion. The last weekend he could play husband, father, and lover all at once. The house in Frederick appeared calm, the children innocent in their laughter, but beneath the roof, a man's secrets had reached the point of no return. The perfect facade had shattered. And Shan'ann, returning home that Sunday night, carried with her not only exhaustion from travel but the quiet, unshakable knowledge that her husband was not the man he once was. She had caught him out. The question was, what would happen next? Every family has its conflicts, but in the Watts household those conflicts became quiet wounds that never healed. To the outside world, Chris and Shan'ann were a picture-perfect couple, raising two daughters and expecting a third child. Behind closed doors, however, simmering resentments, between Shan'ann and her in-laws, between her expectations and Chris's passivity, created fractures that widened with time. The most public fault line was the rift with Chris's parents. At its center was a seemingly small issue, a dispute over food during a family gathering. Celeste, known affectionately as Cece, had a severe nut allergy. Shan'ann, protective and outspoken, demanded vigilance. But Chris's mother dismissed her concerns and served food that could have endangered her granddaughter. For Shan'ann, this was not just about safety. It was about respect, about whether her children's lives were taken seriously. She felt betrayed by her in-laws and, worse, unsupported by Chris, who refused to confront his parents directly. This argument was later dubbed Nutgate by those who analyzed the case, but to Shan'ann it was no trivial matter. It symbolized the loneliness she felt, the sense that she was carrying the weight of protecting her children and holding the marriage together, while her husband remained silent. In texts to friends, she described feeling isolated, with no partner standing beside her. Chris's avoidance, his refusal to choose sides, his quiet retreat from conflict, left her not only angry but deeply hurt. Psychologists who later studied the case noted how silence itself can be a form of control. Chris rarely exploded, rarely argued, rarely confronted. Instead, he withdrew. For Shan'ann, who thrived on communication and openness, this withdrawal felt like abandonment. She pushed harder, desperate for answers, while he receded further, feeding the cycle of mistrust and distance. By the final weeks of her life, Shan'ann was carrying multiple burdens: pregnancy, financial stress, a crumbling relationship with her in-laws, and a husband who had emotionally checked out. The world saw her Facebook videos of family joy, but her private texts revealed a woman fighting battles on every front, against betrayal, against indifference, against silence. For Chris, those same tensions became the justification he whispered to himself. In later interviews, he described feeling controlled by Shan'ann, painting himself as a man suffocated by her strength. Yet this was not the portrait her friends described. They saw a woman doing everything she could to save her family, holding on to love even as it slipped away. The truth is likely more complex. Their marriage was not simply one of victim and villain until the very end. It was a marriage where control, silence, and conflict coexisted, eroding intimacy little by little. By August 2018, those fault lines had grown into chasms. Shan'ann knew her marriage was failing. Chris knew his secret life was colliding with reality. And yet neither of them, in those final days, could see just how catastrophic the collapse would become. The story of the Watts family collapse is not preserved in memory alone. It is etched into data, the texts, the browser histories, the phone records that speak more honestly than Chris Watts ever did. If we want to understand the final weekend, we must turn not only to words spoken in person, but to the secret trails left in the glow of screens. Investigators combed through the digital record with forensic precision. What they uncovered was chilling. On Shan'ann's phone were messages filled with despair and clarity. She told friends her husband seemed cold, distant, even hostile. She confided that he would not touch her, that he was avoiding her, that he had become someone she no longer recognized. Her texts revealed a woman documenting the collapse in real time, almost as if she knew one day these words would serve as evidence of her suffering. Chris's devices told another story, not of despair, but of fantasy. He Googled lyrics about starting over and breaking free. He searched for vacations with Nichol. He browsed apartment listings as if preparing for a life apart. On the night of a family trip, while Shan'ann posted hopeful videos about their future, Chris was searching for romantic getaways with another woman. Nichol's phone painted yet another layer of truth. She looked up wedding dresses. She researched Amber Fry, the mistress whose testimony helped convict Scott Peterson of killing his pregnant wife. She searched for how to prepare for a new relationship, even as Chris's wife carried his unborn son. These searches, made weeks before the murders, became haunting markers of intent, or at least of dangerous fantasy. The contradictions in this digital legacy are devastating. Shan'ann was writing texts like, "I don't feel safe," confiding her heartbreak to friends, while Chris was exchanging hours-long phone calls with Nichol. Shan'ann feared abandonment, Chris was daydreaming about a clean slate. Their truths lived in separate devices, separated by secrecy, yet destined to collide. In the end, the digital record became the most damning witness. It revealed the dual lives, the lies, the obsessive energy poured into an affair while neglect consumed his family. And it raised questions that remain unanswered. Did Nichol truly know the full extent of his lies? Did Chris's searches reveal premeditation, or the mind of a man spiraling toward destruction? More than court filings or police interviews, the digital trail exposes the slow-motion collapse of a family. It shows us how obsession takes root in the digital age, how betrayal can be hidden in plain sight, and how truth can survive even when people try to bury it. Shan'ann's words, Chris's searches, Nichol's curiosity, together, they form a chorus of contradictions, a haunting echo preserved forever. The house in Frederick may be silent now, but the devices speak, telling a story of betrayal, secrecy, and the quiet unraveling of a family destroyed by deceit. Even after the convictions, the confessions, and the endless media coverage, the Watts case refuses to rest quietly in history. It is not only the brutality of the murders that lingers, but the contradictions, the unanswered questions, the chilling unknowns that refuse to be buried. Chris Watts confessed to killing his pregnant wife and 2 daughters. But his story shifted again and again. At first, he claimed Shan'ann had harmed the children and that he killed her in a rage. Later, he admitted to killing them all himself. Still later, in prison interviews, he spoke of hearing voices, of feeling trapped, of moments he could not explain. Each version contradicted the last, leaving investigators and the public to wonder. Which story, if any, reflects the truth? The question of premeditation also remains unresolved in many minds. Was this a crime of sudden fury, or was it planned long before that final weekend? The digital searches, the apartment listings, the fantasies of freedom, all point toward preparation. And yet, the silence of Chris's demeanor, the calmness of his outward life, complicate the narrative. Was he calculating, or was he drifting blindly into catastrophe? And then there is the shadow of Nichol Kessinger. She has insisted she knew nothing of Chris's intentions, that she was blindsided by the truth. Investigators never found direct evidence linking her to the murders. Yet her searches, about wedding dresses, about Amber Fry, about moving forward, fuel speculation. Did she ever suspect? Did she ever question the speed with which Chris was willing to discard his old life? To this day, her role is debated, her name forever tied to a crime she insists she did not see coming. The family tensions also raise haunting questions. Shan'ann's estrangement from her in-laws, the isolation she felt, the silence she endured, were these just ordinary fractures, or did they feed the abyss Chris ultimately stepped into? Could intervention from family, from friends, from anyone have stopped what was already spiraling out of control? Perhaps the most haunting question is not about motive or timeline, but about humanity. How does a man transform from a husband and father into the killer of his own family? Was Chris Watts born with a darkness that surfaced under pressure, or was it shaped by circumstance, a weakness of character that crumbled under the weight of temptation and resentment? The answers may never be clear. What remains are contradictions, silences, and shadows. The official record gives us facts, but it cannot explain the void inside a man who chose annihilation over honesty. The Watts case endures not only because of what was lost, but because of what remains unknowable. And in that silence, the questions grow louder. The Watts murders are not just another entry in the long archive of true crime. They are a mirror held up to the fragile illusions of modern life. Behind the smiling photos, the cheerful Facebook videos, and the polished suburban dream lay loneliness, betrayal, and secrets powerful enough to destroy an entire family. Shan'ann's digital legacy is now a haunting record of resilience and heartbreak, a woman fighting for her marriage, protecting her children, documenting her love even as it was crumbling. Chris's digital trail is the opposite, fantasies of escape, endless searches for a life unburdened by responsibility, the quiet erasure of the family he once helped create. And between them, a mistress whose presence still divides opinion. Was she deceived, or did she ignore the warning signs? The house on Saratoga Trail stands silent now, its walls no longer echoing with the laughter of children. Yet the story lives on. In the data, in the questions, in the heartbreak that cannot be resolved. The story of Shan'ann and her children should never be reduced to headlines or speculation. It is a reminder that behind every curated image lies a deeper truth, one we may never fully see until it's too late. 7 years may pass, or 70, but the warning endures. Betrayal can hide behind the calmest smiles, and silence can be as dangerous as rage. If this investigation helped you see the case in a new light, stay connected. Support this channel by subscribing, share this story so their voices are not forgotten, and let us know your thoughts below. Together, we can ensure their memory is honored, not by sensationalism, but by truth.